So this is the section, this is the reading we're going over and have been going over, all right? It is available as a PDF on your courses. You can look for it. It's titled The Indigenous Contribution and Perspective. There's also, of course, the PowerPoint to it. We've gone through this material in quite some depth. What I wanted to do today is start on this page here. Okay, this is the page that Hidden Heritage. And I am going to bring up my sheet, and that starts on page 7. So, why is this so important? It is an incredible, like I mentioned, it does an amazing job of really helping us to get some perspectives that I don't think that you get very many other places in terms of the material that you're going to be covering here. I always say that people understand this, and as of course the pages that we're looking at right now. We went through this, and this is where we're starting, right here, capitalism and its history. I don't know if you have heard of this before, but I'm just going to read a lot of this, okay? In most conventional historical accounts, it's assumed that our modern economic system of capitalism was entirely the product of European ingenuity that ushered in the Industrial Revolution. I'm going to share a video piece with this as well. This all is all background to what that other video will do. When the economic system of capitalism arose in England during the 18th century, its first form was mercantile or trade capitalism. The English colonies in North America, including the religious pilgrims, were organized as joint stock companies. This stage was followed by industrial capitalism with its factory system of production, and finally, in the 20th century, of monopoly capitalism. One may ask, why did capitalism arise in Europe and not in some other continent or geographical place? After all, there were a number of civilizations in the world that had pre-capitalist conditions, such as the advanced urban civilizations in Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and the Americas, where capitalism might have eventually arisen. Europe, after all, was backward, both economically and culturally, until the Crusades of the 12th and 13th centuries. The Crusades opened up the Silk Road to China, and the desire for goods and trade with other pre-capitalist centers in the world. Two factors that gave Europe the impetus to move ahead on the capitalist path were its sailing ships and navigation ability to sail out of sight of continental coasts across broad oceans to loot the New World. With the gold and silver stolen from the Americas, combined with armies and sailing ships, European nations were then able to dominate and destroy other pre-capitalist centers around the globe and quickly monopolize world trade. And you're going to hear me talking about this monopoly. This is really a very central part of colonization and these companies that were formed. They were very specifically created to take what wealth from the natural world that could be taken and turn it into wealth. So the author continues to go on. Such an immense amount of gold and silver bullion was looted from Central American and Andean civilizations that the European colonial powers, Spain in the first place, were able to bankrupt other non-European trade centers. Then the author goes on and he talks about Weatherford. He argued that the rise of monopoly capitalism is linked to the silver looted from the Andes Mountains of South America. Cerro Rico, translated Rich Hill, is a mountain of silver over 2,000 feet that has been continuously mined until today since 1545. In fact, 85% of the silver mined in the Andes Mountains of South America came from Cerro Rico. And then the author goes on to talk about all of the gold, the incredible, beautiful artifacts that the Spanish conquistadors ran into, and they just melted them down and made them into gold bars. The amount of gold looted is estimated at 2.8 billion in contemporary values. Probably more today, because this is like eight years ago. Silver was more suitable than gold for coin to Europeans because of its durability. It became a primary medium of exchange in the developing capitalist world. Now, you remember last time my lecture, if you listened to it, they talked about the actual forms that were used here, at least in the Americas, as a standard of trade. So, there was a certain kind of trade that was here, and then you have another morphing over in Europe specifically around the use of silver and gold, things that were taken from the ground. One could argue that we were doing it here too, but it was a different form. It wasn't the type that you see unfolding after the European invasion. You see this even in the Far East. They were masters by this time of making weapons, of mining and going deep into the earth and taking these minerals and turning them into steel. They did that in South America and in Central America to a certain extent, but it was more for art. It wasn't for the type of weapons and material that eventually became a very cornerstone to the civilizations we see around us today, the so-called modern civilizations, the advanced ones, the developed ones. These are terms, these are very colonial terms. I'm going to keep coming back to them as well. So anyway, I digress. Hastened in the development of a money economy, okay, once they had the coins, okay, because instead of barter and exchange at European trade fairs, under the old feudal system, silver coin became the economic medium of exchange. So this reading, it really goes and walks us through how we came to have coins, how the whole economic system we see around us globally today, how it was actually birthed and what it's rooted in. Listen to what the author has to say. This hastened in the development of a money economy and the ushering in of true capitalism. Soon the circulation of gold and silver from the Americas trebled in Europe, with the annual output from America 10 times the combined output of the rest of the world. Like that's mind-boggling. In another chapter, Weatherford links the birth of corporations, the modern corporations that we see around the world today. Listen, to piracy and slavery. Spain used conquistadors to loot the Americas. The British used pirates and private trading companies. In their quest for gold, the commodity most in demand by the Spaniards soon became slaves. Why? Spain had already killed most of the Indians in the Caribbean and other coastal areas of Spanish America. The British especially turned to piracy. Unable to find a Cerro Rico of their own and other mines in North America, they raided Spanish ships carrying gold and silver bullion. In 1562, this chap, John Hawkins, with the patronage of Queen Elizabeth I, became the first English slaver. Hawkins' logo on the bow of his ship was a bust of an African slave in chains. Page 8 of the reading. Working for Hawkins was a young Francis Drake in command of the slave ship Judith. Drake assembled a syndicate of investors in 1577 to finance a series of raids on Spanish colonies in South America. He plundered 16th century Spanish settlements of present-day Chile, Peru, Central America, and Mexico. It's estimated that his financial backers for this assignment probably included the Queen herself, reaped profits as high as 1,000% on their investment. The Queen gave Drake 10,000 British pounds as his reward and knighted him. Capitalism, the author says, was born on the twin supports of the African slave trade and piracy of American silver. Unbelievable but true, according to this reading. Trade, he goes on to say, eventually replaced piracy for the British when the flow of gold and silver played out a century later. Fur in North America became a commodity, and we're going to talk about this, how the fur trade evolved. Every colonial power was seeking some kind of a monopoly around the world. They actually divvied up the world in Europe, and Africa was divvied up at a meeting. And as you're going to see, the reading goes on to talk about the establishment of these joint stock companies. There was Hudson Bay Company, but there was a lot of other companies. There was the Northwest Company. You probably heard of them. Other colonizing joint stock companies at the beginning of the 17th century, the forerunner of the modern business corporation, included the New France Company, founded in Montreal, the Virginian Company of London, founded in Jamestown, and later the Dutch West Indies Company, founded in both New Amsterdam and Albany, New York, and the Massachusetts Bay Company. These companies were all founded by profit, and as Weatherford explains, eventually these colonizing joint stock companies founded different kinds of plantations throughout the Caribbean and along the North American coast to do what? He quotes, grow sugarcane, tobacco, indigo, rice, maize, corn, and some cotton. By 1670, all of the important parts of Anglo-North America and the Caribbean had been allotted to one company or another to explore, control, and to exploit. It's rarely mentioned, he goes on to say, in mainstream literature that the 13 English colonies along the Atlantic seaboard of North America were in fact joint stock companies. Talks about the Pilgrims, how they first went to Netherlands, but they couldn't find any way to make money, so they decided to pack up and come to the New World. And their first shipment back to Europe contained furs and lumber to sell. And we're going to talk about the deforestation that occurred after colonization on the East Coast. Oh, there's a lot of buildings that were built in Europe using the lumber, the trees that were cut down here during this period. Not many people talk about that either. By the start of the 18th century, the financial institutions of the modern capitalist world operated with well-established joint stock companies, extensive banking networks, and stock exchanges. The entire economic transformation of the world had taken approximately 2 centuries from Columbus's so-called discovery of the Americas. More than 150 years ago, Karl Marx wrote the following assessment of capitalism. The discovery of gold and silver in America, the extirpation, enslavement, and entombment in mines of the Aboriginal population, the beginning of the conquest and looting of the East Indies, the turning of Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of blackskins, signaled the rosy dawn of the era of capitalist production. In the Americas, capitalist development was marked by the genocide of tens of millions of indigenous peoples and the destruction of their societies and cultures. I really wanted to walk you through that, and I hope I didn't lose very many of you. It's an important part, and you will be tested on this material, so it's not a wasted effort for you to kind of take some time to get something out of it. So then it wraps up the chapter, and I'm already at 33 minutes, so I don't want to spend too much more time, but you're going to be responsible for the last page 8, 9, 10, and 11. I want you to know, read this piece here on first ecologists. What are ecologists? They're the individuals that human activity undertaken to restore and maintain the balance of nature. An ecologist is an activist in ecological matters. And he says that it was the indigenous peoples of the Americas that were really the first ecologists. and they practiced very specific land management processes that are spoken to on page 8 and goes into page 9. So I want you to make sure that you understand a lot of this material. Of the reading, get this. European observers marveled at the natural bounty of America, of virgin sturgeon 6 to 9 feet long, of Mississippi catfish that weighed more than 100 pounds, of Massachusetts oysters that grew to 9 inches across, as well as lobster that weighed 20 pounds each, at flights of passenger pigeons that sometimes nearly darkened the sky, and speculated that a squirrel could travel from Maine to New Orleans without even touching the ground, and bisons ranging as far east as Virginia. So this is, another thing I want you to, it's amazing, really start to read some of this stuff. Talks about what happened from the moment that by 1580, Columbus touches down on this peaceful area of the world where the Arawak Indians were, and by the 1580s, it was basically he destroyed the entire landscape. It just became a desert. And Vine Deloria Jr., you're going to hear me talking about him. What he said, what is really required in his book, God is Red, 1973, he's passed on now since, but this is what he said. Rather than maintaining a hold on a religion imported from Europe, he recommended seeking a new religious commitment. He writes that when we seek God here in the North American landscape and among its first inhabitants, the Indians, we must throw out the Judeo-Christian concept of linear time from creation to apocalypse through exploitation of people and nature, and think in terms of space, relating land, community, and religion into an integrated whole in order to have a proper relationship with the other living things. Only by returning to the land can we have an adequate idea of God. So that's the reading, and we're at 36 minutes. So thank you for listening. I have a girl that I need to get down for her nap. So please listen to this video. You're going to get tested on it. Okay? Talk to you soon. Alrighty.